Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another video game news live stream for Friday, July 19th. So, yeah. I'm going to still stick to the general idea of not doing Yu-Gi-Oh! This week. Inherently, I don't think it's actually changing much, but it is playing better into the general idea and concept of getting to the news quicker and just not spending extra time warming up. It's definitely made a significant change on the length of these streams, and inherently maybe just over a prolonged amount of time having shorter video game news live streams will increase the ratio of watch time to get a better result overall. I also got a comment, as we'll scroll down the SteamDB to see the top games being played today, on an old video I had done where I was looking at making spotlights, I call them quick looks now, of games that I got free that year, which inherently had me playing a game I would have never picked to play or cover otherwise, and the comment said it was a pain to watch and that it was a bad video, generally speaking, is the synopsis of how I surmised the comment. And I have to agree. I totally agree. Fortunately, after I believe that year, I never went back to the concept of playing games just because I got them free, or playing random games just because they just at random. Like, I arguably will say I've gotten a lot better, maybe at least a medium amount of better since I've made that video, as far as just making commentary and covering games. But a big part of that certainly is just I now put a lot more thought into what games I want to cover. I have some enthusiasm for it. The game, I think it's called Galactic Empire 2, that I was covering, is one of these space simulation games that I would have never picked in the first place. It had a ton of text in it. It really felt like, even as I was rewatching the video myself, because I don't even remember covering this game, but yeah, even looking at it, it really felt like it was a kind of boring style of game to me. So even if I did cover the game today, I still probably would have a fairly similar experience and cover it in a fairly similar way, in that I was just hitting next. It looked like moving turns around. It definitely felt like it was more of a tabletop game that had been a tabletop style of game that had been converted to a video game than a proper modern action focused video game. But yeah, there's not a lot to say to those comments when it is right, but it is, I think, helpful to admit when you're wrong and highlight when people actually are giving you fairly constructive criticism. It's always nice too when I can recognize in myself that I am not just automatically having a knee-jerk reaction and dismissing criticism, which is what a lot of people do. I would say most people probably do that they discredit, and immediately they just subconsciously try to find ways to discredit and dispute any criticism whatsoever. And so, yeah, but yeah, I can't deny it. And in general, I've always been quantity over quality in the content I make. I try my best to make quality, but I also am not willing to play less games to become an editor to edit out all the bad or slow parts in footage. I don't want to be anywhere close to something like Video Game Donkey, where he's editing clips from video games for 100% comedic effect and not really showing any gameplay at all. Or more in the middle is something like Game Grumps, where they play video games, but mostly they're just using it as a background excuse to make jokes and be silly. And I don't know if there's too many fairly successful gamers on YouTube or Twitch that actually play games to the point where you actually see them. Weirdly, it would be specialists who are likely playing just Counter-Strike 2 over and over again, and mostly just showing footage of them playing it and not really commenting much. But yeah. So I guess that is that. I'm not sure I played any of Islands of Insight in between the last stream and this one. I got busy doing other things, and certainly I'm going to be more busy doing other things just in the foreseeable future. I did get my super expensive SwitchBot S10 Robo Vacuum Mop today. I have not unboxed it, and installing the plumbing for the automatic fill drain dock is potentially something that's going to take some extra time, so I may not even by Monday have it fully set up. And also, certainly it is also worth pointing out, I have entire rooms that I'm just not going to even bother to map in my house because they are so cluttered with stuff. It's just really a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff in the floor that I need to find extra time to clean out and organize much better, and we'll see if that ever happens. That is just yet another project that I'm kind of failing on. Here we can look at my chart showing that since Wednesday we've seen a general trend slightly downward, which I guess makes some sense. I probably would like to see if there's some way I could encode this to see what days of the week the top games are getting played, whether it is high on Mondays or Tuesdays, although inherently it would only give me enough data points for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because I'm not running my macro on any other day. So all I could tell you is I couldn't tell you which day of the week is the days that people play the most games. I could only tell you that whether Monday, Wednesday, or Friday is which of those 3 days are the most often played. And inherently, I'm not sure that it isn't just a general trend of whether people are playing games or not in the top most played games that tend to suspiciously seem like they have a lot of bots in them. So yeah, could all kinds of different things could be true, and my information just wouldn't tell me anything about that. I guess I did watch some more of Danganronpa on Hulu. It is really just the Danganronpa game. That's all it is. There's very little extra animation, although there is a shower scene in the Danganronpa anime showing the butt of the main protagonist male character, which really doesn't change much in any way, in that I do not recall that being in the actual game. I do wonder though if the Danganronpa I played on PC is very much an upgraded version of the game that includes a lot of stuff that would have possibly been made for an anime first, and so there might have been a much worse version of it originally released for maybe the Nintendo DS, or maybe just even for PC. I think 999 might be kind of the similar experience too, is that the DS version of 999 may very well have been a somewhat worse version. I do know that the final puzzle in 999 required the 2 screens in the DS version, so they had to change it to make it work on the single screen. And that does highlight a issue, certainly, is in that Nintendo, even themselves now, really don't have a good way to bring back or re-release anything that they made for the 2DS, 3DS. Well, the DS came first, dual screen. Then they came out with the 3DS to make it 3D, which I believe the 3DS was more powerful, so there were games that would have only worked on the 3DS anyways. And then they came out with the 2DS just because some people didn't like the 3D effect of the 3DS. The 3D effect of the 3DS, again, a thing you just can't really emulate properly on a Switch or a computer emulator. You can do it, but it's just not going to fit the similar form factor. It's asking way too much, certainly, that demand that somebody run an emulator and have 2 monitors set up always to play 3DS. Which also on the DS, the bottom screen had a touchscreen on it, and they did a big amount of stuff with that too. Yeah, honestly, I don't even think I spent a lot of time watching TV. Yeah. So, kind of have to, as far as the catch-up section, leave it at that. Here we can see Video Games Chronicle has this feature where they said visiting the Nintendo Hotel Marufukuro was a surprisingly emotional experience. Let's see. Apparently, this has something to do with the Nintendo playing card original building in Kyoto, Japan. Although, I don't know if this hotel really has a direct sponsorship there, or if it isn't just a case that there's a Japanese company hotel making an experience similar to it, connected to it. And so there's some pictures here that might be interesting. What I suspect this is the original offices, or one of the older offices, because Nintendo has been around for like 100 plus years, and so it's not super crazy that they would have moved offices even a couple more times. I know they haven't moved too much. Here you have a reflection on this picture. I'm not sure how you really avoid reflections. Probably the best bet is to take a picture head on, or block the reflection by standing on the other side of this. This is a pretty awful picture. What this is showing is some Nintendo's original playing cards, which I assume these are all Hanafuda cards, but it's hard to tell the scale there. They look, frankly, fairly large for Hanafuda cards, but it's hard to tell. Again, this could be a giant picture, that frame, or it could be a tiny picture frame. Here you can see Napoleon in the background. A lot of the Hanafuda cards had Napoleon on it, and in general the Japanese were kind of pro Napoleon, and I don't think they probably have changed too much from it. Yeah, little keychain things. Then here's just a picture of somebody playing a modern Nintendo. So yeah, it's an interesting feature though, considering how little of that we really see from Video Games Chronicle, or even your general mainstream video game journalists in general. But it's kind of questionable whether it's even video game related. It's somewhat historical speaking, but that's about it. And yeah, my macro is still broken, so I'm going to just jump around the news otherwise. So the Exploding Kittens Incorporated sales manager has become Kickstarter's new head of games. Maggie Clayton has stepped into the role and wants to empower game creators. Video games, more video games being encouraged to be on Kickstarter is probably not what gamers want. In general, the Kickstarter is just this very risky thing, but it still seems like it kind of has a place. It works, I think, a lot better than Fig, where that concept is just not as popular. And I can certainly see how a lot of projects that are shipping physical goods or need investment make sense via Kickstarter. But particularly when you're talking about video games don't need as much investment compared to, say, a affordable SLA printer, which there was a whole controversy around somebody trying to kickstart or do something like Kickstarter around an affordable SLA printer. SLA is just a fancier style of 3D printer that does, I think, a higher quality of 3D printing. But yeah, it came out and the product was very buggy, even for the tech enthusiasts that were getting free units to talk about it. Even they were complaining about the quality on it, so it must have been incredibly poor quality and not work. Which, yeah, the whole project eventually just got canceled and everybody got refunded. But that is the kind of project that's building a physical thing. A whole bunch of research and development needed to be put into it. Delivering a physical thing, a very expensive physical thing. Whereas video games, you can get the Godot engine for free. You can certainly start with Unity and Unreal Engine for free. You can make games and vertical slices of games extremely highly. And there is this entire industry of video game publishers out there where I don't think there's that much of an industry for investors in the real world. Like, you have your fake, like, Dragon's Den type investors, and you have a couple of companies that say if you have an invention or idea, will help you bring it to market, but they'll do that certainly either by charging you a lot up front to patent or copyright and trademark things and develop it, and then, or they're going to charge you a ridiculous amount after the fact. If you had an idea to build a device, certainly you can't just go to a bank and get a bank loan in many cases. You just won't have the skills to write a business plan that would get accepted. And banks used to be more around that idea of starting businesses and funding the development of products, but they really aren't around that anymore, unless you're friends with the bank managers. There is also crowd supply, which I would recommend if you're making more of a gadget, electronic type device. But then there's also Kickstarter things where you could certainly see somebody figuring out how to make quilts or, you know, keychains, something smaller that might have some fandom. Of course, the significant problem with a lot of these projects too is that they just run afoul of blatant copyright infringement. Like, if somebody was to start a Kickstarter to make Harry Potter merchandise, but they don't have the rights to Harry Potter, or inadvertent copyright infringement. There's just too many companies, too many patent trolls out there that already own some patent that's too close to something you've already invented. So yeah, I do think Kickstarter has a reason to exist. I think Kickstarters for comic books kind of still make sense, but I'm not sure it really makes sense for games. And I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying an opinion. Here we have a GameDeveloper.com headline that can't possibly be right. Keywords has launched an AI-powered FAQ translation tool that says it will reduce costs by 100%, effectively making it free. And there's no way that's true. And anybody that claims they're reducing costs by 100% or higher is lying to you. Because let me throw out just a general thought here without looking at it any further. This AI-powered tool has to be accessed by a computer, right? The computer has to be plugged into the wall, right? So, inherently, your costs are going to be at minimum the amount of electricity, even if it's only a few pennies, that it costs to run the computer. And at a major level, it could be well above the cost of buying a new computer or maintaining a computer or replacing computers when they break. So there's just no way you're ever going to get to 100%. Even if they were trying to say it would reduce cost by 50% and they've done the percentage wrong, that's still unlikely. Now, translating frequently asked questions with AI, if we get into more detail, sounds crazy. And it is worth pointing out that today there has been major problems because of a company pushing out an update that broke a lot of computers and single-handedly seemed to have shut down the entire airline industry in the United States, which that is a national security issue. Immediately it seems obvious that the same software should not be run on everything, or that there should be at least way better vetting as far as updates, in that important software does not all update at the exact same time or connect all to the same servers. Single point of failure is pretty obvious there. But also, I would argue, any kind of software like that is almost certainly the kind of software that should be funded and written by some agency that doesn't exist in the United States as part of the government. That there really should just be some, for the betterment of society, National Institute of Standardized Technology subdivision as far as secure programming division. But yeah, the update to this CloudStrike is the name of the company software, this patch that broke everything. I suspect it is a patch that is being put out because CloudStrike only a few days ago was named as the reason why AT&T's services were breached. Although it does seem like the story there is AT&T was using CloudStrike, but they were using an email and password login, no two-factor authentication or anything like that, that was particularly old. So, yeah. Take that for whatever you want. It sounds like that is just IT corporate negligence. But yeah. Microsoft, in parts, were definitely down today too. I think OneDrive was mostly what was down though. I'm not sure if people were struggling to sign into Xbox services or sign into Windows itself, although maybe they were struggling to sign into Windows. I did notice this morning that my automatic door lock didn't unlock, and it said it was jammed. But it said it was jammed. It didn't say that it was a server issue. And honestly, it wouldn't say anything if the servers were just down. And it's kind of crazy to have an automatic door lock that's just on a schedule in any way be connected to a server in such a way that it wouldn't just automatically run the schedule and then report the findings later as whether the door unlocked properly or whether it got jammed or not. Alright, let's move on to the next story. There is a report that Mortal Kombat developer NetherRealm is conducting layoffs. We may have talked about this again. Again, my macro didn't run well, so I had to just manually open all the tabs. The World of Warcraft General Manager John Haidt has joined Hasbro as the president of Wizards of the Coast. This is kind of old info. Here we have Steam, and you can see that mostly they are just back to the normal advertisements. Well, they're totally back to the normal advertisements. I kind of feel like there's two versions of this ad. I don't recall it being red here, where it says your games everywhere. Either I'm just misremembering things, or I could have sworn this was a white box with black text before. Wouldn't that kind of make more sense? And have some white in it for the Steam Deck logo. Maybe they tweaked the video overlay. Yep, and I imagine there isn't going to be too much of a new game to really highlight or point to. Yeah. I talked about that archival torrent Exodus version, newest version. I looked at the other projects this person is running, and I have to admit this person seems to be running several archival torrents of games that almost certainly some of them are going to claim they still have copyright. I don't think any of them are really old enough to be in the public domain, because public domain is kind of 1960s. It's like 75 years after the death of the artist in copyright because of Disney, in most cases. But yeah, they also have several other projects. One's for Apple II software and computers, one's for educational software that would have been really old. All of these are fairly smaller, and one for Windows 3.1 software. So each of those would be very much historical experiences that I imagine most kids would not care about, whereas the Exodus games might still have some relevancy in which kids would actually want to play them, and adults might have some nostalgia on some of them. But yeah, the rest of them, like the claim that any of these massive collections, which are huge in a number, hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes. Exodus is like 600 gigabytes if you get all of the manuals and stuff. Like, it's not worth the storage space to download for most people, and you're unlikely to really want to play any of those games. If anything, I would hope that instead of companies claiming that this is depriving them of some sale, since most of these games aren't even on sale, that's ridiculous, that it would inspire companies, if there are any companies that still own the rights to all of those games, to consider making remakes or just making new games using the same general theme and name to it. Like Raptor is an example of an old DOS game, and if you just made a new game called Raptor that was loosely inspired by the old Raptor, that would at least be an idea to, as far as a game. I wanted to point out Double Fine here, not that they're still rocking transgender colors, I don't really care about that, but they are. Apparently Tim Schafer had this Dev Heads podcast, went on this Dev Heads podcast, and maybe I should listen to it if I have some free time, to talk about how game development has changed, which certainly for him in particular, I feel like development has probably changed quite a bit, because I've always felt like Double Fine has been kind of a weird, less demanding type of company run by Tim Schafer, just not really held to a higher standard to actually produce games than make games that sell in a timely manner. And he probably had a pretty easy time, relatively speaking, as far as game development goes, working at LucasArts before then. And certainly Tim Schafer gained his success and popularity by working on LucasArts games such as Full Throttle. This is an interesting symbol. I feel like this is one of the Linux distros uses this bird-like symbol. So I don't know what it has to do with video games though. What is also kind of interesting here is that I mentioned in the last stream that there was an assassination attempt on presidential candidate Donald J. Trump, and it didn't have much to do with video games. Well, it still doesn't have much to do with video games, but in a very roundabout way, it kind of connects in that the bandmate of Jack Black, who was in Brutal Legend as the main protagonist and voiced the main protagonist in Brutal Legend, which was made by Double Fine, apparently said something extreme, I'm not sure exactly what his words were, in Australia against calling for violence, it seems. And so Kyle, I believe is his name, has been let go by the agent of Tenacious D. So one would assume that Tenacious D as a band, since it was just Jack Black and Kyle, if that's really even his name, feels like they've probably broken up, at least for the time being. And even at that, that is such a roundabout and twisted way they even make it feel like it in any way is connected, that it's kind of pointless to even mention it. This is interesting that you can get a check mark and then there's a whole other Xbox here. So inherently, I guess the idea on Twitter is if you are given a gold check mark that is affiliated. Interesting. So that's how that works. Probably doesn't matter any. Paramount Plus, I believe it was, has canceled the Halo TV show. And here you have GameDeveloper.com saying the TV show and Microsoft's Xbox strategy shared the same problem. Spartans never died, they're just missing in action. Yeah, the most recent Halo games also not particularly great. Although, there was never really any praise around the Halo series. In that it didn't seem like it was being run by people that even knew what Halo was or cared about Halo. And I think one of the major complaints is that they had a character playing Master Chief, or like one of Master Chief characters, taking his helmet off for most of the time. It's much more important, I think, to probably complain about Halo as a game series than it is to complain about the Halo as a TV series. But yeah, I don't expect even now that we would see good games to TV series from Microsoft in general. Fallout perhaps being an exception to that, in that you had a lot of success there. But then also, if you think about it for half a second, Fallout is a game series that has a lot of deep lore and a lot of fandom you can lean on, whereas the Halo series has a lot of fandom, but not really a lot of deep lore. In fact, most of the lore is kind of ridiculous. There's just not a lot of there aren't side stories in Halo games. There's not a bunch of NPC characters. So, yeah, it was not a good game to potentially pick for a TV series in the first place, which does bring about a good question as far as Microsoft owns so many properties now. What games would be good ones to make a series by? I think you could definitely do something, probably not live action with Overwatch, since they own Activision Blizzard now. You definitely could do something with Diablo, StarCraft, Warcraft, whether that goes deep into World of Warcraft lore or just Warcraft to start with. There's plenty of other Bethesda games that have decent stories. Even the Double Fine games are games that have decent stories. And I'm just thinking of the top 4 companies that I can remember Microsoft owns. I suspect they own 2 or 3 other companies. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is basically just a TV series already, so it definitely would make a lot of sense to just take those cutscenes and turn it into a fully animated short series, 4 or 5 episodes telling the story of Hellblade 1 and 2. They went too ambitious with Halo. They should have kept Halo in their back pocket and experimented with some of the other properties. Perfect Dark very possibly would do fine as a TV series too, since they're not really doing anything with it right now, although they're teasing that the new Perfect Dark is going to come out. Former Chibi Robo developers have announced a spiritual successor called Co-Robo. This is one of those early Wii games, I believe, or Chibi Robo was a early Wii game that I think was one of the interesting kind of little kid-friendly games. There was a real resurgence of kid-friendly games when the Wii came out, where before then it did definitely feel like you were running closer to a lot more focus on just adult games. When the Wii came out, that would have been right after the original Xbox and Halo and the Gamer Bro growth of the gaming community going for more mature games. But even the GameCube from Nintendo was putting out a lot more adult focused and older kid focused games. The waggle function of the Wii just encouraged more third-party developers to make kids games. I don't think a ton of them sold though, which was kind of the problem. Nintendo has that unique monopoly on actually selling or making good games for kids. Which I guess it's worth mentioning that Woot right now has a sale for the Luigi's Mansion 2 HD game, slightly discounted at $45. Here we have GameDeveloper.com, Video Games Chronicle with the same headline. Apparently Xbox hopes to find a new partner for the live action series. I always hope, regardless of how bad a show seems, I always hope that it ends with some kind of ending. One of the worst parts about rewatching Warehouse 13 is the fact that there's just these awkward 5 episodes at the end of a shortened 5th season to wrap up everything, when there's just no good reason to do it that way. Here we have from Video Games Chronicle a kind of dubious headline in my opinion. 82% of American players made an in-game purchase last year, a survey suggests. According to the report, 62% of all adults over the age of 18 played a video game. So you have 2 numbers here, and it kind of contradicts what the focus should be here. The first one saying 82% of some amount of people, because we don't know what the amount of people is, made an in-game purchase last year, which that number seems way too high, in my opinion. But in fairness, depending on what you define as an in-game purchase, if you're just talking about DLC, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I could see people buying a season pass at the beginning being counted as an in-game purchase, people buying DLC after the initial purchases, that being defined as an in-game purchase. It doesn't inherently mean it's microtransactions. It doesn't inherently mean it's DLC. When I come over here to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and buy a pack with gems, that technically, I guess, is still an in-game purchase, but I'm not spending any real world money on it because I have earned through daily quest the premium currency. So on that aspect, I guess even I'm part of the 82% of players, and perhaps that is more of a statement just on how many games have, how almost all the games have integrated some form of in-game purchase into their experience. Very rarely do you get to a point, and see, you can even stretch this even further and say that imaginary currency purchases in-game could be defined as in-game purchases. If the only way you can get gold in an RPG is by killing virtual rats in the virtual game, and then you get virtual gold to spend on virtual items in the shop, that's still a purchase inside games. You're just purchasing it with video game currency. I would assume that they're not stretching the definition that far, though, because then the number would almost certainly be close to 100. Then you have the second headline here that, according to the report, 62% of all adults over the age of 18 played a video game, which that number seems kind of low, assuming that they are defining the definitions pretty loosely here. Almost certainly, I would think 80 to 90% of all adults over the age of 18 played a video game in the last year, because you kind of have to. Like, you have no game on your cell phone at all, no free cell, no nothing like that. There's never been an ad to click and pop the balloons. You don't play anything at all on a PC or console. Like, you would have to be just like a hyper fan of some other form of entertainment to actively avoid playing video games, or just absolutely hate video games, which I've met a few people that absolutely hate video games for insane reasons, in my opinion. But yeah, even I have not met a lot of people that don't have some kind of games, and there's just such a wide variety. You can do hidden object games, you can do free cell, you can do Publishers Clearinghouse mini games to win chances to win tons of money. There's just email ads and things like that. It is kind of weird that Prime Day has now finished, and I managed not to buy anything else after the last time I said I had stopped. But it is kind of interesting that the Amazon Prime Day sale doesn't have any giveaways or video game twist to it. You would think there might be a lottery, spin a wheel for an extra prize type thing when you purchase things, but also there might be some legal reasons around that, where if you're purchasing an item to get an entry, that's perhaps too much. Give it 10 years and you will see things like that pop up almost certainly. Of the people surveyed, 77% play on more than one platform, and over a third regularly use a combination of console, PC, and mobile. It's claimed that video game enthusiasts in the US spent 45 billion hours on gaming sites and apps last year, with esports becoming increasingly popular. Is it still becoming popular? I guess I have to take it that is true. 86% of Gen Z and 80% of millennials said they watched esports, while 53% of Gen Z and 61% of millennials said they engaged with esports content. Seems like this survey is esports focused. And I just don't know, really, as far as esports go. I think I've opened up the rest of these articles. We'll get to them in a second. The FTC says that Microsoft has turned the Xbox Game Pass into a degraded product, quote unquote. The US regulator is claiming Microsoft is exercising market power post-merger, definitely making more of a complaint around the fact that the merger was allowed through, although it is very questionable just if FTC's continued court case, which is still seems crazy that they have to make a court case and they can't just say no to the merger or undo the merger. Seems like it's still going through. The craziest thing certainly would be if the merger was just undone completely. Although inherently, even if the merger was undone, Microsoft probably will have already successfully encouraged so many people at Activision Blizzard to leave the company, or fired them and laid them off, that a re-separated Activision Blizzard would be such a weak company that it would no longer stand any kind of competition to Microsoft anyways. So I don't know if they undid the merger, it would be anything more than just punishing Microsoft, which maybe Microsoft deserves to be punished, certainly, but I don't know if it actually creates more competition or strengthens the industry in any way or makes it better for consumers. The Rare Studios artist Brett Jones passed away. We probably talked about this in the previous stream, but it's worth pointing out again. Along with his work on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, Jones did art and visual effects for Guardians of the Galaxy, Star Wars, and Doctor Who. I would assume all of those are the movies of those titles and not video game spin-offs of those things. You don't see a lot of people that have a portfolio in which they work both on Hollywood movies and video games, because I would assume working for Hollywood movies tends to keep you pretty busy and pay you better and treat you better than working in the game industry does. That would be my guess, at least. Alright, so let's just gonna go through this as I see it. There is a massive amount of clickers, and if I see something on the fall list, then that means we've already looked at it. These are going back to July 17th. I was really just uncertain as to how my macro has been working, when it is working. I definitely feel like there's a decent chance that that there is a lot of games that I have missed this week, in the past couple of weeks, really. This Master Detective Archives Raincode Plus, being an expansion on Raincode, is kind of from the makers of Danganronpa. So if I own this game and it supported English, which it doesn't seem like it does yet, it would be one to potentially play, although not really a great argument to play it because I've only covered Danganronpa 1, and it makes a lot more sense to play Danganronpa 2 and the Danganronpa spin-off games that I can get my hands on and actually play. I think they're all available in the West, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's see. Let's go back to news and move around onto the other side of my tabs. GameDeveloper.com has an opinion piece here that they've appropriately labeled an opinion piece as far as how they feel Project 2025 will impact game developers. I am not going to go any deeper than that. You did say in the last stream it's kind of surprising how politics have not really talked about video games. Although they tend not to really talk about video games during the election cycle, they tend to talk about bigger things anyways. But almost certainly most people can form an opinion as far as what the federal level of elections on top of local levels of elections would tend to do as far as the game industries go. Although it might be a little bit harder to figure it out. Video Games Chronicle says EA Sports FC 25 is removing contracts from Ultimate Team. London's O2 Virgin Media Gamepad venue has attracted nearly 90,000 people. I don't know what it is, though. Is it an arcade? It's a VIP gaming lounge. Sure would be nice if they had some pictures of what was in there, because it definitely seems to me like it is kind of like a bar without alcohol where you can rent out places to play what seem like console games, sponsored by a cell phone company in the UK. The arena's free to visit gaming space launched last summer. Yeah. Don't know the real point there, other than the fact that I would assume that these kinds of locations are struggling to have businesses in them in general, and so you perhaps make an attraction point like this just to advertise for free, or you make an attraction point like this so that people can purchase drinks and snacks from you. Things like that. Here we have Video Games Chronicle saying that the FTC claims the Xbox's Game Pass price hike is consumer harm. It is the consumer harm it warned of. Splitgate 2 has been announced and is coming to PC and consoles next year. We may have already covered that. And then 2024 game sales remain strong in Europe despite fewer AAA releases. New data suggests unit sales are down just 1.6% in the first half of 2024, which just 1.6% actually does seem like a smaller number than I would suspect, considering how few AAA games have come out and how most of those games are not coming out to major enthusiasm. Helldivers 2 being perhaps one of the exceptions there. Nintendo is releasing a new two-way stand for Joy-Cons. It's going to release in Japan in October. From what it looks like, it is the plastic thing that came free with the Switch to connect Joy-Cons and make them a controller with what I suspect is a minimal amount of circuitry to make sure that the Joy-Cons actually charge while they're in the plastic thing, and possibly, just possibly, lets you connect physically to the Switch or the Switch in a dock so that you don't have to connect over wireless. The stand will allow players to charge additional Joy-Cons on a stand while the Switch console is docked, or they can remove the stand and use it as a controller during gameplay. What this isn't saying, however, UK version's going to release on October 17th. It's not implying in any way, though, that it would let you connect it to a PC. And as far as I know, this cord, well, it's probably USB-C on this side, might just be a power barrel or power plug on the other side instead of being USB-A or USB-C. I never even gave these kind of connectors a chance though, because in no way did that feel like that makes holding Joy-Cons better. I do see when you put it like this that there is almost this cutesy idea that you could rotate the whole thing at 45 degrees and have buttons in this corner and this corner and then analog sticks here and here, but notice it doesn't actually line up that way. If that was going to be the case, you would have had to have shrunk the Joy-Cons to be even shorter, which, yeah, I think the scale and design of the Switch in general, as far as the ergonomics, is already terrible. Maybe that's something we will see improved upon on the next Nintendo console. There has definitely been rumors that it will just be a bigger device. And one of the YouTubers that I follow did just put out a video talking about how cell phones in general have this problem, in that the desire, because the screens are so small, is to put the screen closer to you so it feels more immersive and you don't see things out of your peripheral vision that aren't part of the screen, which to do that means you have to get denser and denser pixels on the screen, like retina displays, so that you can bring the screen closer to your eyes, which then creates problems that you really shouldn't be looking at the screen that close to your eyes that long, without risking myopia and other eye strain conditions. So on a smaller scale, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo has kind of realized that, and the only way to really fix that is to just make a bigger screen. And I would love to see a size race here between the next Nintendo console potentially releasing a, instead of 7-inch screen, which I believe is what's on the Switch OLED version, and yeah, 7 inches about the Steam OLED version too. I'd like to see a size race where the next Nintendo console comes out and it's 8.5, 9 inches, possibly even 10 inches. Very possibly not at a 16:9 ratio. It is possible that we might just see double width 32:9 ratio resolutions, just really kind of stretched out, and that ratio is probably crazy to do 32:9, but yeah, something like that might be the way to do it while still having something that would kind of work when docked to a TV, which that's the limitation there. And if there was a size race there where Nintendo came out with something that was 8 or 9 inches, maybe Steam would come out with a big old unit that was 10 inches wide. Particularly if the screen would fold in half. A 10-inch screen folded in half would be 5 inches, and that's not really a problem there. It really isn't. You could have controllers on either side that then just connected to a big old screen in the middle. But yeah, I would like to see a sizing up, even if it is only a few fractions of an inch, both for the next Nintendo console and the next Steam Deck model. The Steam Deck OLED runs at 1280 by 800, and that's already kind of a weird resolution. If they could get it to instead be 1920 by 1080, that would be 1080p resolution, and that would probably run a lot more games correctly, because most games are not targeting development for 1280 by 800 as a resolution. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a massive increase in compatibility as far as resolutions go, just by targeting what games are developed on. Here we have Video Games Chronicle talking the same obituary story of Brett Jones, which both pictures I've seen of Brett Jones seem to be fairly appropriate as far as what you could find for somebody who passed. And then Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes is now available on PC. We had talked about that in the last stream. Let's see. And then Gamatsu says Honkai Star Rail version 2.4 update launches July 31st. Grounded Incorporated announced a new game called Children in the Flesh for PC. Let's see, do they have a Steam link? No. This trailer does look like it might be a creepier one. Are we going to get trailers to actually play today? Well, looking at this through the camera like that makes me wonder if we aren't simply going to be controlling characters by giving them commands. Yep. There's a couple of these games that were made many years ago where you're telling characters what to do via voice commands. There was a VR one where you were telling characters what to do because you couldn't move yourself. Weirdly, neither one of those games that I'm thinking of that are older has this low polygon cartoony art style to it. So one, I would say I don't think the gimmick is particularly great in the first part. I don't think it ever really caught on. And two, I think the art style is completely wrong here for the kind of game you're trying to do. The tag on the ear of the kid implies they might be clones or something, or at least disposable, considered disposable. Death End Request Code Z has a 5-minute trailer, which I guess this is the next game in the Death End Request series, which I believe is a dungeon crawler game, although the anime lewdness is high here, and the neon color palette is certainly high too. I think it's probably better to not hit play on this trailer just out of safety's sake. But yeah, it is tagged as an RPG game, and I don't know if it's coming to PC. Looking at the tags here, it doesn't seem like it is. Weirdly, it is tagged here that it's coming to the PS5 and Nintendo. It's due out September 1st in Japan for PS4, PS5, and Switch, which would explain maybe why it's not coming to PC or Xbox. The former Chibi Robo developers announced a robot action adventure game called Ko-Robo for consoles. Now, if I'm recalling correctly, Chibi Robo had this power plug he was kind of carrying around, and some of his actions were limited to him only being able to move so far without having a recharge in his power. Here you see that there is a power symbol, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like that still going on, although maybe it's gone wireless as far as how he recharges himself. This is a game that apparently is going to both be kickstarted and campfired, which I've never even heard of Campfire before. Yeah, I would assume that either you have a time limit looking at this, or you have a battery limit and some health that I suspect also might be lowered if you fall too far. And looks like there will be some human characters that interact with them. I'm not sure Chibi Robo actually did any of that. Perhaps some of the problem here with the previous game, Chibi Robo, is just the phrase chibi being used. It definitely wouldn't have been particularly well understood or known when the game came out. Although Ko-Robo here doesn't mean anything to me either. Fragment Note Plus, Fragment Note Plus After Story, and Fragment Note 2 Plus are all coming to PC on August 2nd. They're currently available for Switch, iOS, and Android. So these are more mobile focused games, I would suspect. Little visual novels if I was to guess. The Case of the Golden Idol is coming to the PS4 and 5 on July 23rd. This one was released in 2022 on Steam and is already on my wish list, and I feel like I've made a YouTube short around it fairly recently, so I'm not going to make a new one. Looks like an old point and click adventure. Toei Animation and Nestopi have announced a side-scrolling survival adventure game called Reverb Project Tokyo for PC. This is surprising in a lot of ways because I don't believe Toei Animation has ever worked on a video game before. Perhaps this is a statement that Toei Animation is desperate and doesn't have enough work or isn't making enough money as an animation studio. Or perhaps this is something that they've done a lot of and I'm just not familiar with it. But yeah, when I hear Toei Animation, I'm thinking the company that makes anime movies. I think they make a lot of the... It wouldn't be the Studio Ghibli movies, because that's made by Studio Ghibli. But they make, I think, movies kind of like Studio Ghibli. At least that's what I'm thinking. Let's do an experiment here. Click on Toei Animation and see what else comes up. Nothing. So, yeah, as a publisher, as a developer, there's no other listing here. This might also be a case, certainly, where Toei Animation is just lending their name to another company. It's also a possibility that they're using AI for background music. Interesting. So there is this now AI generated content disclosure. I don't know how much Steam is going to actually enforce this. Fusion of a veteran anime studio and indie developer. 70 years of a history of animation. Animation here not looking great particularly though. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is one or two people taking on a side project for Toei Animation and not a huge team for the looks of the quality there. Homura Hime gameplay trailer is available on Komatsu. This is... Let's see, do we have a Steam link to this game? Not yet. Check out the trailer, I guess, if you're interested. It looks like it's a action PC game. Let's jump in here. See if we can see just a little bit of the action before we move on. With my SwitchBot S10 robot mop and vacuum, once again, things just don't want to load. I did go out of my way to kind of mop and clean the house and the floors before letting it actually try. Yeah, this is just not working. Because I didn't want to immediately have the mop pad or the sweeping brush just covered in dirt and dust. It is, even now, buying the most expensive, the top of the line device you can find. These things are maintenance droids, to use a Star Wars term. They are not designed for you to track an inch of mud on top of a floor and expect it to actually do anything there. Even tracking just muddy shoes in the house. Probably better off mopping yourself. So while I probably will get rid of my cheap electronic sweeper that I already had, I'm still going to keep a mop around, 2 or 3 actually mops around that I have, and I still will probably have to do deeper scrubs every season at least, spring cleaning, things like that. Back to video games. River City Saga 3 Kingdoms Next has been announced for the PS4, Switch, and PC. Let's see. So this is in the River City series, but set kind of in the past, it seems, although not completely in the past, because notice there is a character here driving a biker gang. As a Westerner, though, it still feels very weird to even try to care about any of the River City Saga characters that aren't the River City girls. Like, I think that they were just so much more visually interesting to look at. Trying to bring River City back to what it was before then just doesn't make any sense. And even at that, if it's the same characters, I still would demand or want to see better animation. River City Girls had a very high level of animation, not this pixely 2D animation that we're seeing here. Divine Dynamo Flame Frit launches this winter for all consoles and PC. It was previously announced as a physical edition bonus for Card in Sale, so it's some kind of spin-off game as far as I can tell. Yeah, that looks weird. Looks like something that would be a spin-off game. It's funny, it seems almost like we're seeing a regression back to more pixely games and games that feel like 1990s, 1980s PC games. A juvenile Metroidvania called The Good Old Days launches in 2024 for the Switch and PC. Interesting to see a Metroidvania set in what looks like a modern environment, urban environment, city environment. The juvenile part, I guess, means you're playing as kids, which Metroidvania games have never really been made for kids or involving kids. It's questionable whether that would work or not. I probably would, but if you were going to make a Metroidvania for kids in a kids game, you're going to change so much that it's going to be very unrecognizable as a Metroidvania game, and in the sense it's not going to feel much like a Metroid game, and it's not going to feel much like a Castlevania game. And possibly if you're making a kids game that's a Metroidvania, you're going to dumb it down and make it so easy that it's going to not really ring true as a Metroid game anyways. Snow Brothers 2 Special launches in 2024 for the Switch and PC. Yeah, when I had heard that there was going to be a new Snow Brothers game, I thought there was only one, and I guess that's true, although maybe Snow Brothers 2 Special might be an evolution of a Snow Brothers 2 that has come out in the past. That is a possibility. Hashire Hibiriki EX has been announced for the Switch and PC. This one from Sunsoft, I suspect, may not come to the West. Devolver Digital and Skeleton Crew Studio have announced a tactical kung fu game called Forest Strike, or Forest Strike. I guess it's 4 space strike, although no space, for the Switch and PC. Okay. Let's see what this looks like on Steam. Another pixely kind of side-scrolling beat-em-up game. Hexadrive has announced a Japanese-style horror adventure game called Nireya of ... for PC, which, it takes a lot of effort, frankly, to start to get any kind of community agreement on what a Japanese style horror adventure game would be, in particular, because I would assume they're talking Japanese style horror to begin with. And what does that mean? Because there's all kinds of Asian countries and all of them have horror movies and horror stories, all of which perhaps have slight feeling to them of similarity, but a lot of them have very different. And it's not until you get really deep into what's the difference between a Japanese horror TV or movie versus a Korean horror movie versus a Filipino horror movie or an Indian horror movie or a Chinese horror movie. Like, there's a whole bunch of different room there for each of those cultures to have slightly different boogeymen and different ways they depict boogeymen, whereas the West has just been telling horror stories, I think, a lot more, to the point where it's just become unified as this similar things. Like when you think vampire in a Western story, you kind of know what you're going to get. You're either going to get Lestat or Dracula, or you're going to get the sexy vampires. Perhaps not much of that as far as the Twilight series these days, but you get fairly consistent vampires in the West. Whereas, yeah, there's a lot of room for different kinds of vampires that have different kinds of events. Yeah. And I would argue it's probably a mistake to say Japanese style horror, because even to some of the Japanese, they have pushed back on this idea of labeling Japanese RPGs as Japanese RPGs instead of just calling them RPGs. Although it is helpful to label JRPGs as JRPGs because they do have such a distinctive style. But yeah, the screenshot certainly looks like it could be something. Inherently, Japanese style horror games also hold a lot of negative connotation to them too, in that there's been a long history of lesser quality horror games from Japanese companies that just don't have the budget or care to make a AA or AAA level of horror game. And frankly, there really aren't that many AAA Western horror games. So it's kind of a bad label in that case. And we definitely have seen a ton of low effort asset flip horror games that tend to be Japanese style listed on Steam. Moving on, Gamatsu says .45 Parabellum Bloodhound debut trailer is available to look at. Let's check to see if this is on the follow list. Apparently not. This looks like a weirder animation style. There is something to be said, though, I would say, about these screenshots. Even though they seem fairly pixely, there's kind of just a higher scale and resolution to it, where because the character here is tall and stretched out and looks way more anatomically correct than you see a lot of pixely characters animated as, it just feels a little bit better. Yeah, this feels like this is a image that just has like an anti-aliasing filter turned off on it or something like that, instead of most games that just look pixely because they want to look pixely. InZone 2 launches in early access on August 26th. Let's see what InZone 2 is all about. Looks like a real-time strategy game. Yeah. It says it's a colony sim. Inherently, I would have to just barely dip my toe into real-time strategy games. I'm going to cover some of the old ones I have nostalgia for, like Command and Conquer, Red Alert, things like that. I'm almost certainly not going to lead into playing modern versions of those games, which is probably fine because I imagine real-time strategy games haven't changed that much. They may have gotten bigger in scale and better in visuals, but the general concept I imagine is pretty much the same. Moving on, Komatsu says Sonic X Shadow Generations has a Generations of Stages trailer, which I would assume that this is perhaps a comparison of a very similar level in Sonic X Shadow Generations versus this being an old Sonic Adventure 2 level that I assume is not actually in the game. That would be my assumption. We're still just hoping that Sonic Team can make a good Sonic game, but who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. Otherwise, I'd imagine you just go back to the last 3D platforming Sonic game, which, yeah, they certainly are all over the place as far as the last 3 major Sonic games, in Sonic X Shadow, which is not out yet, and then Sonic Mania, and then the 3D platforming Sonic game. I can't even tell you what the name of that was, even though that was received fairly well. Warhammer 40k Speed Freaks launches in early access on August 6th. Seems weird to have cars in a Warhammer 40k. What looks like this is some kind of weird spin-off combat racing experience. Which there's already a ton of Warhammer 40k games that have been announced, come out, and failed. It seems like it would definitely be a mistake for them to try and just have a flood of Warhammer 40k games come out at any point. The Mortuary Assistant is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox Series and Xbox One on August 2nd, alongside a Definitive Edition update. This is one of those games that came out on Steam and got a lot of coverage from mainstream YouTubers. Yeah. It does feel like it is more of a horror experience than you normally would get, to the point where I question if I was to actually get this game and cover it, how much of it could I actually show and cover. It being a mortuary, I don't know if you're going to have any kind of nudity on dead corpses, or if you're going to have blood and gore. You're embalming corpses, it says. It is on my wish list, but it is kind of one of those games, which there's a decent number of those games still on my wish list, that I was just asking people to friend me on Steam and gifting me those games just so I could own them. And that certainly is a one way to support me, certainly, is that you can look down in the description and friend me and gift me a game. That doesn't in any way increase the odds at this point that I would cover that game, but it is a nice one-time purchase way of supporting me without having to either support me through Patreon, which I don't know if my Patreon's even still running, or through any kind of like YouTube things, which I guess I'm not monetized on YouTube, so I don't think there is anything there that can be done. The open world city builder Overthrown is going to be published by Maximum Entertainment for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. see if this is one we've looked at. It's taking too long to load. Yeah, there was definitely a chance that because of the CloudStrike problems that I would have not been able to open any tabs today. And this, then I guess I would have streamed very little. Inherently there was a chance that I wouldn't have even been able to stream at all. Gimmick 2 gameplay reveal trailer and screenshots are available. I bet this game does not have a Steam link. Nope, I was wrong. It does. Gimmick 2 would make me assume that there's a Gimmick 1. Looks like it's some kind of platforming game. Unknown 9 Awakening has a gameplay walkthrough video. This also feels like a game that I missed at some point. Which is funny because I kind of feel like I saw this, but if it's not on the follow list, I didn't make a YouTube short around it. Zombie Police Christmas Dancing with Police Zombies launches August 8th. The name alone makes that seem like that's probably not a high quality game. It looks to me like it's mostly just going to be a visual novel. And it is on the follow list at least. So I do know I've looked at that one. Let's see. Goyoto. Yeah. Goyota, I imagine is how it's pronounced, launches August 13th. It's a puzzle adventure game. Yep. The Famitsu sales from 7.8 to 7.14 have been updated, with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD outselling a new game in Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown Deluxe Edition. And then we have Nintendo Switch games all the way down to 10 with Princess Maker 2 Regeneration selling as the next new game. Then we have Nintendo Switch games all the way down to 17 where Elden Ring for the PS5 is shown, and then Nintendo Switch all the way down to 25 where Stellar Blade for the PS5 is sold. Then Nintendo Switch all the way down to 30. Yeah. Nintendo inherently, with these sales numbers for Japan at least, is proving they don't really need to launch a new console. They could potentially push it back to Christmas of 2025 and take one more generation of time. Although I imagine the equipment and the build wouldn't change any in that time. They'd just be getting cheaper prices on components and chips, or they would be building up inventory for launch. Meanwhile, PlayStation 5 is far behind it, and in Japan, Xbox is far below even that as far as their weekly sales. Although you notice here that the PS4 is below the number of Xbox Series X consoles being sold. Splitgate 2 has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and PC. Did we actually get to Splitgate 2's page? No, we did not. Sea Smash VRS New Dimension launches September 26th for PS5. Visions of Mana details Aish and more elemental vessels, elemental plots, and little cactus. So screenshots and details here if you're interested at Komatsu.com. Hexadrive announces a multi-directional shoot-'em-up called Infinity Bullets for iOS and Android. We are not seeing a lot of announcements for mobile games. perhaps we will start to see bigger publishers who have the right email addresses to contact people and put out press releases for mobile games. I would say it's probably the case that there are websites that are focused around Android and iOS gaming that popped up and are their own separate thing, whereas Android and iOS gaming at this point seem to be becoming mainstream enough that you could just talk about them on your average video game news site and make them speak of them in the same breath as a console game or a PC game. Speaking of cell phones, again, this has nothing to do with video games, but they said that the attempted assassin of Trump was using a Samsung phone, and it used the Israeli highly secretive Celebrite phone hacking hardware and software suite to unlock it in 30 minutes and crack it. So, yeah. I found it very weird that there was such a focus and such a talk about hacking a cell phone when there was really not likely to be any information there that needed to be collected in a timely manner, or possibly collected at all, since the assassin was already shot and killed. In the old days, that would have just been case closed. It definitely is a case that there are people talking about the phone in hopes that more backdoors would be put into phones, in hopes to whittle away any rights to privacy that your average United States citizen might have on their cell phone. But yeah, every time there's a big story like this, there's this over talk about cell phones, when perhaps that is actively being pushed instead of talks about better gun control, or perhaps better security procedures in general. But yeah, my suspicion is that the Celebrite system is using flaws in cell phones to be able to copy the encrypted data, possibly having to actually take apart the phones and directly interact with the chips, but probably not. But it's likely copying the encrypted data to an image and then making millions of different copies of the image and running it on a server to brute force hack the password, thereby bypassing the need for the image to actually run on the same hardware, or even for the image to be able to hit "you've tried 5 times and now you have to wait," as far as the situation is there. I did hear that if your phone is completely turned off, Celebrite calls that cold, and it takes longer to hack phones that way compared to it being hot. And what turns it from being cold to hot is when you first turn on your phone and put in the password for the first time. That's when it loads in a decryption key into memory, and there are apparently a lot of backdoors in the hardware, lack of security, as far as reading that decryption key to then use it to decrypt the internal storage. So yeah, again, that doesn't have anything to do with games. In fact, I'm a little surprised the story has not mentioned anything about video games yet. Give it some more time and I imagine that will happen. But I am rambling, so let's get back to news. Beckside has announced a 3D puzzle game called Hololive Treasure Mountain for PC. have a Steam link here. You can probably tell my macro did not run to open all the Steam links on these stories, which would have saved me some time. Don't think that game looks particularly interesting. Let's see, Komojo, probably mispronouncing that, Vermilia Scarlet Symphony is coming to the PS5 on August 8th. It was released in 2022 on Steam, and you can see, well, it doesn't look terrible if the screenshots want to load. It is not particularly well received on Steam, and we still are seeing a lot of that. It does seem like games like this just get enough momentum and get enough profit on Steam, even being poorly received, to eventually just re-release themselves without anything that seems like a major improvement. As far as this is a upgraded HD remastered version of a 2009 version of the game, so perhaps the 2009 game was better received. Is the second game here in the series better received? No, not really. Even though it's 100% positive, it's only 21 people. Yep. So, I am not particularly impressed by that. The art style might have caught my attention, but on the other hand, if I want to be generous, I could say at least even a poor game these days is not anywhere as bad as some of the garbage games, what they used to call shizo games in Japan, which literally I think translates to shit games. That there was a whole genre of that where people knew they were making garbage games and they knew they would sell anyways. EA Sports FC 25 launches September 27th. Let's see. Wow. I've seen so many stories about EA Sports FC 25 and yet none of them had a Steam link until this point. The Plucky Squire Rocket Ride gameplay is available to look at on Gematsu. Still not got a proper release yet. Then Hollow Cocoon is coming to the Switch on July 25th. I'm still running into this situation also where games like this, I remember this was one of them, that for some reason I just could not make a YouTube short based on certain tabs being open, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the content of the tabs in the page. It seems like just some tabs don't work with my macros and some tabs do. And I don't think there's really any logic to it. This game was announced for the PS4 and 5. This is probably slightly older news. Just Grow Things launches August 15th. This is older news. Some of these are definitely going to be older. It's Nocturnal 2 being announced. Yeah. See, here we have Paramount's Halo show is killed in action, but Xbox will try and save it. KIA's. I saw this and I just thought Kia, and I thought it was saying it was in IKEA for some reason, which makes no sense. Upcoming ACMI Interactive Exhibition welcomes back A Horrible Goose. A new exhibition at the Melbourne Museum will show Untitled Goose Game, how it was cobbled together. This I think is from GameDeveloper.com headlines. Devlop is heading to Liverpool to develop Develop North. UK Game Industry Conference will swap Brighton for Liverpool in November for a one-day event. Interesting. I haven't heard of either one of these events though. Develop North. Ubisoft touts solid early 2024 financials thanks to X-Defiant and reliable franchises. That perhaps highlights why Ubisoft has not made things like Beyond Good and Evil 2, is that they haven't been making more money on reliable franchises, if that's the phrase you want to use. Pacific Drive sales have cruised past 600,000 copies sold. Then, okay, that is going to bring me to the new games on Steam, starting in the correct spot at this point. And I guess I'll be generous and make a YouTube short on that. No to that. Give it a chance. Gym Simulator. Interesting thought. See, the problem with this is that Supermarket Simulator has just pretty much proven that you can asset flip almost any game into a simulator of running a business, and it kind of works. This looks like this might be something. Let's see, what is this? Just looks like an RPG Maker game, so that's going to be no. This is a tower defense game, so no. This is some kind of VR climbing game, so I'll give it a chance. Commander Bug Wars, give a chance to. TYGA. Doesn't look like it's interesting enough by the screenshots. No to that. No to that. Give a board game a chance. This one doesn't have good enough screenshots. And it's tagged as walking simulator, which inherently, at this point, I am willing to ignore all walking simulators. I tried some of the most talked about ones, and yeah, this is gonna be no. Yeah, there's something here. We have yet another simulator, retail company simulator. Now, notice here, supermarket simulator, retail company simulator, and gym simulator. All are simulating a job where you mostly have just a cashier standing behind a cash register. And people come in and interact with objects and then pay and leave. In gyms, they're usually automatically billed, even so. Gym simulator in particular might be very little as far as what you're doing, as far as gameplay is. Whereas most other simulators, like PC Builder Simulator, for instance, have a lot more interactivity and a lot more programming challenges to it. And this is a prologue for a simulator, which we definitely don't need demos for simulators. Here we have a game called Taxi Rush, which looks like just a straight clone of Crazy Taxi, which with the next Crazy Taxi announced, and then announced to be hopefully a MMO, who knows what's going on here. We're still seeing a massive amount of these clicker low effort games. I think it's still pretty easy to say no to clicker games. Frankly, Steam should just be saying no to more clicker games. It is definitely not a proactive policy that they have. They wait till years and years have gone by for something to be a problem. These hidden object games, like I commissioned some mice, are still also flooding Steam, and inherently it doesn't seem like much of them ever get to the front page, and it doesn't seem like much of them actually sell. enough for it to matter. Here we have what looks like just another clicker. I'm gonna say no to this because this looks like it's probably a troll game. Red door, yellow door. That's gonna be a no. Dogecoin, or just coin, is a clicker game. Sorrow Asylum 3 looks like it might be something. Elder God Simulator looks like a real game. We are running into a major problem here, where now we're seeing clicking games that are claiming to have something to do with crypto, which would just make me suspect that there might be a crypto coin function in the code to get crypto coins for the developer, which is against the terms of service on Steam. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there actually is no crypto miner software in it, and it's just using the meme of cryptocurrency as a theme. Here we have another low effort Chinese porn game, which, yeah, instead of using Japanese horror as a brand, Chinese porn at least makes a lot more sense, because it is really these games that actually would not be considered pornographic even in China, but they are designed to titillate by asset flipping Chinese ladies, and they don't actually show anything, but they imply that there might be something because the limitations of Chinese published adult games are so incredibly strict. In fact, it's so incredibly strict that I have not seen any news stories of any games being approved via the Chinese censorship board in China in a long time. Either I stopped following the source that was reporting on that, or that censorship board has stopped reporting on what gets approved or not. Like, it feels like it's been at least a year since last time I heard that story, and I don't know if that means that it has been at least a year since any significant game has been approved on Steam. This almost looks good, but it is kind of all over the place as far as the screenshots go. Yeah. So I can't quite say yes to it. Speaking, I guess, of Asian games, Memento Mori on my cell phone, I'm still playing that, although there have been several times where I've missed the daily quests. But also it's not punishing me horribly because of that, either by missing things. Here we have another RPG Maker garbage game. Swarmer Legend. Time management Swarmer game. I'll give this a chance since I haven't seen one of those cook serve delicious style games with shawarmas. But yeah, Memento Mori is updated once again. Tinkafuma, the adult game I play, also has updated. I would still lean towards saying Tinkafuma is probably giving you better and more content than Memento Mori is. But Memento Mori definitely is a game designed to be more passive than even Tinkafuma is, although both games are designed to basically play themselves. Here we have a card game that might be something. I almost certainly am being too generous to some card games when I should be probably holding them to a higher standard. I'll give this a chance. Here we have what looks like an Incredible Machine clone that inherently you could just take the puzzles of the Incredible Machine and asset flip something without having to actually think of any puzzles yourself. I've seen a lot of these too, where it's taking little virtual worlds in an isometric view. I wouldn't have really believed that isometric views would have come back into any kind of level of fashion. They weren't particularly even that popular in the old days when they were introduced. Even now, they still don't really make a lot of sense. This is a tower defense game. This one's already on the follow list. Here we have a Marvel game, which we have seen less Marvel games lately. That used to be kind of a high number of Marvel games. Gonna give this a chance, although it's probably nothing. Here we have unable to exit 8, trying for name confusion, while also putting an anime girl in a swimsuit and then having pictures of a more realistic Chinese Asian lady here. And it's tagged as mature, but if it really was mature, it should be in the adult section and not visible to me. Yeah, I heavily suspect there really is no mature content here. Just lewd nonsense, if I was to guess. Opinion battle. Looks like almost like a Heroes of Might and Magic clone. I'll give that a chance, just out of some fandom. Try Dungeon Lore. Here we have another game that looks like it's possibly a lewd game. Otherwise, it's just a match 3 game. Either way, I'm not going to give it a chance. Ancient Phantasma still looks like an RPG Maker game, so I'm just going to say no to it. Does this one support English? It says it does. Looks like it's a Chinese visual novel. No, I still really have not seen any real element. This is just another Exit 8 clone. I haven't really seen any real element as far as what makes a well-viewed YouTube short showing off games or not. It seems to be fairly random. And I've said this multiple times, I think, but inherently I think it is random because the shorts feed is just randomized. Yep. Otherwise, I would have assumed that YouTube shorts that are showing videos of either anime girls or live action girls or more realistic animated style girls would have caught way more people's attention than it has. And people would have at least clicked on those shorts. Although I guess the whole idea of shorts is that it's trying to get rid of the idea of the initial click and just autoplay things. I don't know what this is, so I'm going to give it a chance just out of ignorance. Furry Shakespeare as a series is still not one that I want to promote because it does just feel like it is a ridiculous meme of fursonas doing Shakespeare. It's not a non-unique idea. It is kind of a fairly unique concept. It's just it also is a weird concept that I don't think really needs to exist, and I don't think actually leads to people wanting to play it. Here we have a clicker just called Weeb, as in weeaboo, which is just an anime girl in a bikini top and short skirt with the background changing as you click on it. Which, in fairness, if you're going to make a clicker game to catch people's attention, I imagine you would want to look at something like this more than you would want to look at a banana as you're clicking. And since it was a case that you got items that were banana variety, in Banana, you would assume you would get items that were anime girl variety, although I'm not sure you really do. These items available to purchase in the game, I don't think are inherently kind of items that they're just going to constantly add more to that you could then sell on the marketplace. One thing they certainly could do is, and maybe Valve would get in trouble for this, but they could put some kind of limitation on whether or not you could generate marketplace items if you go via the Steam Direct program. It does feel to me, I feel like this game was announced a long time ago. It does feel like to me there could be a premium publisher's agreement that was way more expensive to make Steam Marketplace items. This is a tower defense game, although it does a decent job of not looking like one. And here we have SCP-087, which is perhaps the first game I've seen in at least a very long time that has an actual SCP, Secure Control Protect, or Secure Contain Protect number behind it. Let's see, Gallia. Give it a chance. I think we're probably pretty close to being done. Vampire Therapist sounds like an interesting idea. Despair Devil. Is this a VR game? No. I almost want to say yes to this, but I don't think I can. The graphics look too bad. Dark Hours Prologue. I don't want to highlight prologues. I'm already making too many YouTube shorts already. Rapid Fire is going to be no. Dark Times. It's a top-down shooter. We'll give that a chance. Whisper Forest. Looks like no. Here is another clicker game, I imagine. Although it's called an idler clicker, so maybe you don't actually have to click on it. Union of Gnomes. It's really only the third or fourth game today that has a high level of animation to it. I definitely feel like there's a concern here that we might start to see a trend of just very poor visuals. I'm also seeing visual elements still flash all over the place. And I still think that that is my monitors. My old monitor. I did order a new monitor. Should be about Wednesday when it arrives. Dungeon of Hindenburg. It is also possible that somehow in speeding up how fast these images jump around, that is just a element of me changing how fast these images load. Here we have yet another clicker with dogs this time. Get that one. Well, it's already on the follow list, I guess. Give it another chance. Here we have a text-only game, so that's going to be a no. That's going to be a no. That's going to be a no. This one is mostly negative already, which is weird. Although inherently I'm not making YouTube shorts around games just based on their initial reviews either. So highlighting a mostly negative game still is perfectly fine. But it certainly would give me some insight. Here's yet another Chinese live action / porn game, although this one actually is Korean, so I'll take it back. There, it being a Korean live action game, there might be something more to it. Magic Paper, give a chance to. Escape from Clive will give a chance to. There is definitely a question to be asked here as far as just where is the next big AAA game and what is the next big AAA game? Yeah. I don't even know what it is. I think we can say no to this one if it's mostly negative. Just a whole bunch of clicker games. And yeah, I had already mentioned that the Prime Day sales really were not selling video games at all. It's almost directly opposite. I guess everybody is probably broke as far as gamers go. We're seeing a lot of these days now. In that the Steam Summer Sale did just end, and so yeah, I guess gamers spent all of their budget probably buying games at the summer sale, and most other companies aren't really going to try and compete against that in any way, with the perhaps exception of Nintendo with the re-release of Luigi's Mansion 2. I don't think this is a good enough game. I knew I was opening a ton of tabs today. And see, the weird part about it is I just don't know if I even went far enough back, because I definitely don't recognize a lot of these games. Here you have just a generic free cell game, which free to play, I guess. Nothing wrong with that. I am in very much a different situation now, where I don't feel like I can just recommend playing Tabletop Simulator for games like Free Cell, because now that I've actually looked at Tabletop Simulator, I've recognized that I was totally ignorant and wrong to just make the assumption that that Tabletop Simulator was the end-all be-all solution to playing card games. Alright, and we're only 2 hours in here, so let's play one game on the XYZ Cup. You can see I'm not really playing this off screen. I think I did actually try to play this off screen a little bit this week, but yeah, I'm not really playing it off screen. There's a decent chance that I could get a amount of time off of actually needing to do daily quests on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, starting potentially next month. It probably won't last forever though, but I do have a niece or nephew that wants to play, that is gonna potentially check out Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, so if they start with their own account would be my suggestion, and then learn the game, they could log into my account and do the daily quests, if they want to do that, and then they could have access to all my cards, which I do have a massive amount of cards. As far as this XYZ event, all you can do is XYZ summon it out of the extras deck, so instead of doing that, I just grabbed this deck, which is just a ritual summon deck, as a way of avoiding all of that, since this was a deck that overall had some level of success early on in my experience of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. This deck can win if it destroys some strategies. So I see him saying I can't tribute cards, I think has just ruined it. Did we talk about the story here that the World of Warcraft General Manager John Haidt has joined Hasbro as the president of Wizards of the Coast? Haidt spent 12 years at Blizzards, but now leads the strategy on Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering. Which, I don't think that's really going to change that much, because the general thought in my mind was that Hasbro really just wanted a massive amount of they wanted a massive amount of profit from Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, and so they were raising the prices way too much and licensing it out and making spin-offs way too much. They were just being, Hasbro always comes off as a very greedy game company. You just have to look at the price of like a Monopoly game still. Like the cardboard there should probably be about $2 for buying the physical version of Monopoly, and yet you'll still end up paying at least 10, more likely 20 or more dollars to own Monopoly. And they're not any cheaper in the digital versions, and most of the Monopoly games are not high quality. Not high quality games in the first place. I've already lost here, unless I can pull something off. Summoning this. Take this. Alright, well, with that phone call I was going to lose here anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.